Well, welcome everyone. To those of you who have joined us here in historic downtown Lebanon, as well as those of you joining us online. On behalf of the Lebanon Democrats, I'd like to welcome all of you to this Q&A session with the Democratic candidates for Congressional District 2. So, no matter how technologically savvy our political process becomes, there will never be a replacement for these in-person events. We get to hear from the candidates and see them face to face. I personally remember the value of this. I was in Atlanta and went to a small event like this and saw the mayor at that time, Shirley Franklin, speak. And it was just kind of this epiphany that a person, a candidate, a political figure could speak to a big group, but make you kind of feel like they're speaking to you as an individual. And so I think the value of these events obviously allow us to connect personally with the candidates, but also learn more about where they stand on the issues. So a big thank you to Maggie Goodlander and Colin Van Ostern for taking the time to travel and meet with us today. I know in these final weeks before the primary that your calendars are crazier than ever. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our distinguished guests who have taken time away from their busy schedules to join us. We're privileged to have 3 of our 4 state representatives with us today: Susan Almy, Tom Corman, and George Sykes. Thanks for all you do today. Our format today. So we'll invite each of the candidates to open with a 3-minute introduction, and then our candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions that have been submitted by the committee. You can submit questions to us by using the note card that's underneath your chair. If you need a pen, just raise your hand. And if you're online, you can type into the chat and we'll be able to ask your questions that way. By no other measure than the fact that I think Maggie got here first to the venue, I'll let you start with a quick 3-minute introduction of yourself. Maggie?
Thank you so much, Adam. Whoop. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
It's so great to be. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you, Kate, for having us here tonight. Thank you all for coming out on a truly beautiful Monday night in August. I think we've heard rumbles of thunder, but today I'm 102 days on the campaign trail, and I've loved every single one of them. It's been an energizing and optimistic experience because no one does democracy better than we do here in New Hampshire. And growing up here, you learn how to grill a candidate before you learn how to grill a hot dog. And every single day I've been grilled and asked really good questions. And I'm looking forward to your questions tonight. Some of the questions have been harder to answer. What is your position on daylight savings time? I was asked the other day. Some have been easier. Someone asked me the other day, are those gray hairs real or who's your colorist? That was easy. They're real. And my colorist is coming up from above. So I've earned every single one of these gray hairs. I want to just begin by telling you who I am and what brings me to this race. I can begin at the beginning. I was born on election day in Nashua. And my mom, Betty, who's here tonight, she went into labor and she went directly to Broad Street Elementary School to vote before she went to St. Joe's Hospital to give birth to me. And that is the spirit in which I was raised. When I was 2 years old, she ran for this seat, and her detractors developed a slogan, which was, a woman's place is in the home, not in the house. It got help from Roger Stone, Roger Stone. And that was a winning slogan in 1988. But my mom raised me to believe, as I do, deep in my bones, that a woman's place is absolutely in the people's house. And you know what? In the last month, it's been amazing to see so clearly that a woman's place is also in the White House. We got to get that done on November 5th. New Hampshire made me who I am today. I'm born and raised, and from my living room today in Nashua, I can see the shoe factory where my great-grandfather worked and the hospital where I was born after my mom voted, of course. I became an advocate in my heart here, but a lawyer by training. And I've been on the front lines of the fights. I've always gone where I thought I could believe I could make a difference for our state and for our country. I've been on the front lines of the fights that I think are on the ballot this fall, the fights for democracy, for democracy, for fairness and for freedom. You know, I've dedicated my life to protecting our democracy. I served 11 years as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve. I teach constitutional law at Dartmouth and at UNH, and I helped enforce our Constitution. I was very proud to be a part of an incredible group of constitutional lawyers and scholars who impeached former president, now convicted felon Donald Trump for the first time. And it wasn't the last time. Day 3 on this job is January 6th. And all we need to do is take a look at Project 2025, which is something I hear about every single day on the campaign trail, to see what we're up against, a total weaponization of the Department of Justice. You know, after President Biden won, I went to the Justice Department. And I went there to fight for a principle I believe deep in my bones, that no politician is above the law. I believe just as equally that no corporation is above the law. And every single day on the campaign trail, I'm hearing from people who are feeling pain. They are feeling the pain of prices that have never been higher. And they're seeing that corporate profits at the same time have never been higher. And I'm ready to take this fight to Congress, because I've been on the front lines of the fight of holding corporate monopolies accountable. The corporate monopolies that are jacking up the cost of rent, they're screwing over family farmers all across the state, that are making prescription drugs and healthcare unaffordable. I want to bring this fight to Congress. I want to bring the fight for freedom to Congress too. And here we are in the live free or die state. We're here at a moment when we're the only state in New England that has no constitutional or statutory protections for abortion access. A 15-day abortion ban was introduced earlier this year in the State House. You know, people sometimes ask, did you misstate it? 15 days. This is wrong. This is un-American. And I think we all remember where we were 2 years ago, the day that the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. I was proud to have been a law clerk to Justice Stephen Breyer, who wrote the dissenting opinion in that case. And that day, that decision came down. I was at the Justice Department helping to fight back. We were standing up a reproductive rights task force dedicated to 2 simple propositions: that women in this country should get access to the health care they need, and doctors in this country should be able to provide that care without fear of prosecution. Too many women today in America are denied care, and it's wrong. And I want to fight for this on day 1. The fight starts in Congress, but it doesn't end there. It starts with protecting the full range of rights to abortion access, to IVF, to contraception. These are rights that we had enshrined in law, Supreme Court decisions for so many years, but they're all in peril. And it's time for Congress to step up, and I want to be a part of that fight. It would be the honor of my lifetime to represent you in the People's House. I really look forward to your questions, because this is a hard job. And this is a job interview. You're the boss. We're interviewing for the job. It's an unprecedented moment. And I got into this race because I really believe that I can deliver for you on day 1. And I can promise you that if you put your trust in me, I will work my heart out every single day to be worthy of it. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for
Colin?
Thank you. Is it working okay? Great. It is an ominous soundtrack that we have. Thank you, everybody, for coming. How are you feeling? Good. All right. That's good. I like to hear that energy. I'm so grateful for you to be here tonight and for us to have this conversation. And it's great to be with some old friends, and it's great to be with some new friends, too. Like so many of us, my life wasn't so perfect growing up. When I moved to New Hampshire, I was 22 years old. It was the 18th house I ever moved into. And if you do the math, that is a lot of moving. Often the first day of school was not just the first day of a new grade, but the first day of a new school. But what I found here was incredibly special. This is the first place in my life that has ever felt like it. Now, I know from my time growing up, I know what it's like to live without health insurance. I know what it's like to feel crushed by student debt. When I went to college, I ran out of student loans my senior year. And I went in and I put $33,000 in tuition on a credit card. And I'm glad they don't let you do it anymore. I got lucky. But I know what that feeling is like. And in my adult life, I've tried to work hard like the single mother who raised me. I've worked hard to channel some of those experiences into giving back to my community and fighting for the people of this state. My wife and I went to business school here in the Upper Valley. I followed her to Tuck. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life at that point except be with her. And so I came when she enrolled. I worked at the college for a while. I worked in the kitchen at the canoe club for a while. And I've learned in the Upper Valley I should actually lead with that more, because I think sometimes that's what gets people on board. I miss the cheeseburgers. And I found that this is one of the places in the country, New Hampshire, this special home that I had never had before, where you can make world-class impact. I went on to work at places like Stonyfield Yogurt, a great company that proves you can be profitable and have healthy people and healthy planet right in the mission of the company and do right by. And then I helped launch a new nonprofit college at Southern New Hampshire University that has helped thousands of students get a degree without debt at all. I know what that feeling was like. That's why I fought so hard to help build those programs with an extraordinary team. And I'm really proud of the impact. I became our executive counselor here in New Hampshire when they shut Planned Parenthood funding off in our state. And I knew we had to do something about it. And I stepped up and I ran. It was the same year Chris Pappas ran and Deborah Pignatelli. And it turns out elections have consequences. We ran, we won, we got Planned Parenthood funding restored. It actually took twice. We had to get it restored again. It made a really big impact. And I remembered what it was like to go without health insurance and fought as hard as I could to expand Medicaid in our state. This is something that took an extraordinary amount of work from a lot of people. Legislators who fought hard for this, our new governor at the time, Maggie Goodlander. I remember the final vote. It was actually in the Upper Valley. It was over at the Hanover Inn in a field hearing. The executive council would hold them across the state every summer. And it was a tough debate. Me and Chris Sununu went toe to toe. And the final vote was a 3-2 vote. If you ever wonder if it's worth knocking on one more door or making one more phone call or volunteering for one more candidate, remember a 3-2 vote. 10 years later, 100,000 people in our state have gotten cheaper, better healthcare because of that vote. And that includes addiction treatment services, mental health coverage. It's been an extraordinary thing for the people. Now, in the coming years, we're going to have to take on fights just like these. How do we protect our reproductive rights? Pass a national law to protect the full range of rights from birth control and IVF to abortion access, no matter where you live. How do we get serious about cutting basic costs, housing and higher education and healthcare? Some of these issues I've been working on here for decades. I'm running to be a New Hampshire leader who's in it for us. And that's what I've been for the last 20, 25 years, a New Hampshire leader who delivers for us on the very issues that we're going to have to take on, no matter who our next president is. I'm proud of the grassroots campaign that we're building. Some of you know I've been endorsed by our outgoing Congresswoman, Annie Custer, and I'm proud of that. But more proud, frankly, that every single Democratic mayor in the district has endorsed me too. The vast majority of our Democratic state lawmakers. Hundreds of community activists, every single labor union that's endorsed in the race. And the reason is because we've been through these fights shoulder to shoulder, working hard through wins and losses to make progress for the people of our state. And I think that's what's at stake in this election. And I'll end on this. I'm very proud to have won this exact district. Part of what you're hiring for today is for a champion who's going to go on and win for us in November, to make progress for these issues that we're talking about tonight. In a tough year, in 2016, a brutal year for Democrats, against Chris Sununu, who's a pretty tough political opponent, let's admit, I won this exact district. And I did it by building a strong grassroots campaign in every corner of the state and putting the issues that matter most to everyday families like the one that I grew up in, front and center, and making progress. That's the sort of candidate that I'll be if you give me your nomination. And I'm so grateful to be able to have this conversation with you, Maggie, with all of you who have questions. Thank you for organizing this, and thanks to everybody who's watching from home as well. Thank you very much.
All right, so our first question, since Maggie went first, Colin, you're on a roll, so I'll let you have this first question, but you'll both answer, but you'll just get first stab at it. So there is no incumbent running in the race for New Hampshire's second congressional district, you know. What issue or issues do you think are key to motivating Democratic voters and independents to elect another Democrat to office?
Yeah, get closer, honey.
It's a great question, and it's not abstract. Some of the issues that we need to make progress on are the issues that I hear about on the sidelines of kids' sports games. I served 2 terms on the executive council, but I've been out of politics for recent years, and I have an 11-year-old and a 13. And so I spent literally thousands of hours on the sidelines of kids' basketball games. And other parents don't want to talk about politics, but they will be very quick to tell you that you can't afford to move to New Hampshire right now, because housing prices have doubled, mortgage rates have tripled. Sometimes just to move across town, it can cost 3 or 4 times as much every month. And even things that are so-called political issues are starting to break through on the sidelines of kids' sports games. The attacks on contraception, the attacks on IVF, all of us have stories about family members, loved ones who are here because of IVF. And you hear those very quickly. And so my point is some of the issues that we need to talk about, how we protect reproductive rights. We've relied on Roe versus Wade far too long. In retrospect, the truth is we need to do what we should have done years ago, pass a national law to protect the full range of reproductive rights. We need to get serious about housing costs. Mayor Tim McNamara here in Lebanon told me, and this is someone who has great expertise in the area, served on the board of the Twin Pines Housing Authority. He told me there basically are no more starter homes in the Upper Valley. And his suggestion was we need a first-time homebuyer tax credit to help people get into that first home. I'm incredibly proud that Kamala Harris has been talking about exactly this on the campaign trail. And by the way, we need to pay for it by letting the Trump tax cuts for the very wealthiest, very biggest corporations in this country expire, roll them back, and make sure that we're cutting federal deficits and making smart investments like a new tax credit for first-time home buyers. The last thing I'll say on this question is this. I also think there are important everyday issues that nobody thinks about as politics at all, and usually don't make the newspaper at all. And one of the ways that you win, not just in blue towns, but in red and purple towns, is to prove to people that you're fighting for all of us. There's a bridge getting built over the Hinsdale River that I visited this week. That bridge had been on and off the 10-year plan in New Hampshire for literally decades. And when I was elected, I held a field hearing, brought a Republican executive counselor over with me. We'd heard from locals about ambulance response times over the river and the need to build a new industrial park and tractor trailer widths. And we got it back on the 10-year plan, and it's getting finished this fall. And a place like Hinsdale, the way that you win votes, which is your question, is not just talking about national issues. It's also understanding our communities and understanding our lives. That's what I've been doing for decades, and I know that's how we can win in them. Thank you.
No, for a small state, this is a really big district, the second district, all the way from my hometown, Nashua, up to the North Country. And I was up in Lancaster the other day. Someone said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Nashua." I said, "Oh, Dixie." So, I had never thought about Nashua that way, but it's a big district. But every day, I'm hearing about, like I said at the outset, the pain that people are feeling from high prices. And I think we got to make progress on that on day one. And I'm confident we can. I'm also hearing just a deep concern about our democracy and whether we can continue to function. And I've dedicated my life to really fighting to get things done. I think every single day about something Ted Kennedy said. He said, always find the 30%. You might disagree with someone on 70%, but always find the 30% and get it done. And I think about my dad, who always said he got his education in the United States Navy. So did I. I was really proud to follow in his footsteps. Spent 11 years as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve. One of the things I learned in the Navy was how to mute out the noise, how to focus on the mission, and how to actually get things done, how to find the 30% with people who you might not agree with on much of anything at all, besides the mission in front of you, and how to do that without compromising your principles. So the job I left to come run for the seat was at the White House leading the Biden-Harris administration's unity agenda. And you don't hear much about the unity agenda because disunity and division get a lot more attention than unity and progress. But this was an agenda dedicated to the basic proposition that as Americans, we can still come together and solve our biggest challenges. And I hear about each of the 5 challenges that were at the core of this agenda every single day. Tackling our opioid epidemic, our mental health crisis here in New Hampshire and across the country, fulfilling our sacred obligation to veterans, ending cancer as we know it, and holding big tech companies accountable to keep our kids safe online. So, these are 5 big challenges. They don't get a lot of attention, but 400 pieces of bipartisan legislation were passed to advance the unity agenda. And I'm not talking about the naming of a post office or a bill called the Refrigerator Freedom Act, which actually got floor time on the House of Representatives floor. It was listed as a Republican priority. I'm talking about the PACT Act, the most significant piece of legislation to give veterans in this country access to healthcare. I'm talking about the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which puts more mental health professionals into our public schools than ever before. I'm committed to getting things done, and I think that's what I'm hearing from every every day from voters across the district. How are you going to get things done and deliver? And that's what I've dedicated my life to doing, and that's what I want to do. So thank you.
All right, our next question, you'll probably be able to tell came from one of our state representatives. And we'll swap the order. So Maggie, I'll let you take this one first. How will you ensure ongoing communication with state senators and House members? And how will you support them?
Well, first of all, can we get another round of applause for our legislators? I mean, you are fighting the good fight, and in so many ways, it's been midnight in Concord in the last year. You've been on the front lines of the good fight, and grateful for your service and for what you're doing. You know, one of the things I think government, it's a team sport. We got to work together at all levels. And here you are in the third largest legislature in the English speaking world. And it's an unruly place. But I think that the federal delegation has a really important partnership role to play. I saw at the Justice Department the way in which law enforcement at every level of government can and must work together. And I think the same spirit applies, and the same basic commitment applies when it comes to our legislative bodies. So whether I am coming to testify before your committee, whether I'm writing a letter of support, whether I'm lifting up your voice to come testify before a congressional committee in Washington, I think that the functions are the same, the values are the same, and there's so much we can do together. Every single day I get the question, which committee would you want to serve on if you were elected? And I love this question. It's sometimes it's what subcommittee would you want to serve on within the committee? But to me, this is an easy question because the Appropriations Committee, I think, is where I could make the biggest impact for this district. And I know that the work of that committee is going to depend so much on lifting up the voices and the partnership that we've got to have between our federal delegation and to our leaders in the state house. So this is an advocacy job. It's a legislative job. And I can tell you that I will fight to make sure every dollar that should be getting to this district, well, first of all, that many dollars will get to this district, and that they will reach the people for whom they're intended. So thank you.
Thanks for the question. If there's a state legislator in this room who doesn't have my cell phone number, it's probably Zoe because she lives in the 1st district and is in her first term, actually. Look, I've always believed in this state. One of the things that makes this a special place is our community. And part of that community is knowing who to talk to when you need help or when you need to answer on something. I learned this very, very fast on the executive council. I represented 49 cities and towns and voted on hundreds of contracts, often hundreds of contracts in every single one. And one of the first things I did is work to put all of those contracts online and send out an email every week about what we were going to be voting on. And the reason is because I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I needed help from people in every single community to make a difference. So being able to go to Sue Almy to ask about revenue issues, or to go to Tom to ask about AI issues, or to go to Sue Prentice, our state senator here, to ask about public health issues, somebody who's worked in public health and worked as an EMT. I think that's part of how you do a good job as a representative. That's actually the job that we're hiring for, right? Representative, someone to represent us. All of those fights, from Medicaid expansion that I mentioned, to the Hinsdale Bridge, to getting the Fairpoint labor strike solved back in 2014, 2015, biggest, longest strike in the country that year. But one of the reasons that I knew that it was important was because a town employee in Charlestown called me when the town garage lost their phone coverage. And he was worried about what it meant for public safety. And when I heard that from him, I knew it wasn't enough to go take a picture at a picket line and put out a press release, which basically is what most politicians do when there's a strike. And those things are good, but it's not enough. I found the contract that the state of New Hampshire had with Fairpoint. It turns out we were one of their biggest customers, 5-year contract, $13 million. I called Maggie Hassan, Chris Pappas, called Chris Sununu, and there are other Republicans. Across party lines, we stopped renewing those contracts. That was the day before Christmas Eve. Everyone was back at the bargaining table the day after New Year's Day. And it wasn't because of what I brought into the conversation. It was because somebody in the town of Charlestown knew he could pick up the phone and call me when his phone wasn't working at the local branch. That's the sort of representative I've always been. And that is the sort of representative I will always be of these communities that I love. Thank you.
Colin will keep this flip-flop going. So it's another state representative question. How will you support the transition to clean energy? Do you support expanded nuclear energy? And how should we supply electricity when solar and wind are not producing? So 3 questions.
Yeah.
We can choose.
3 good questions. Not only did I represent 49 cities and towns, but I represented the Ashuelot River, which had 400-year flood stages in the 10 years before I represented that area. Climate change is real. It's wreaking havoc on our communities. It's threatening public safety, and it's hurting our economy. I talked with a small business owner in Littleton this winter. Conservative guy, said he doesn't usually vote for Democrats. Said also he's seen 30% less traffic in his store on Main Street because there just wasn't snow. So let's be honest that what's happening to our climate is hurting us in a lot of ways. Transitioning to the clean energy economy, I think, is one of 3 central ways we need to deal with this. The others being, 1, build more resilient communities, because we have to recognize that the culvert you build tomorrow, when it's washed out, isn't the one that was for the last 100 years. It's the one for the next 100. So build more resilient communities. The other piece we need to really focus on is weatherization. Weatherization often is the highest return on investment of any federal dollar that we spend. And it's not as sexy as the clean energy economy, but it's equally important and can create just as many jobs. But to your question about the clean energy economy, we need to have infrastructure investments in things like a smarter grid and battery and other energy storage systems, because wind and solar are intermittent. We also need to move much more aggressively towards clean sources of energy like solar, like wind, and infrastructure investments that come with it. In terms of nuclear, I have a lot of concerns about new nuclear construction, because the truth is there just isn't a lot of proven ability to deal with the waste. But I don't think that means we should be shutting off R&D or closing our eyes and ears to what can happen in the future. Next generation nuclear holds some potential promise. And I think R&D on things like smaller next-gen nuclear production is one of the things that we need to be exploring. That doesn't mean we should necessarily be building it right now, but it's one of the things we need to keep researching. As with fusion, real moonshots, but the truth is the climate crisis is serious enough that we have to take some moonshots like fusion. The development that's happening not too far from New Hampshire right now holds extraordinary promise, and we need to be able to place a lot of bets because of the importance of this existential crisis.
So, what the costs I hear about every day, energy costs, are some of the highest in the country right here in the 2nd District. At the same time, big oil corporations, the profits have never been higher before. So one of the things when I say I want to fight for a fair deal for all Americans, I mean, a big piece of this is taking on some of the biggest, this is a climate crisis with known culprits, and big oil companies are a big piece of the problem. I want to close loopholes. I want accountability, and Congress can do a lot about that. And I want to be a part of that on day one, because costs for energy are too high. I also want to be a part of making the United States of America and the state of New Hampshire the clean energy superpower of the world. And I think we can do that. I think we're on track to do that, but we've got to be able to look back 2 years from now and see that the Inflation Reduction Act was just one small step towards a true clean energy future and a responsible transition to clean energy. I think at this point, we've got to responsibly transition by looking at all sources. I too share concerns about nuclear power. It also holds great promise, but I think our focus should really be in seeing the upside of what this climate crisis could bring for us, which is jobs, more efficiency, and lower costs. So this is where I would want to put my energy. I think a lot about how now for almost a decade, the Department of Defense has said that the climate crisis is one of the greatest threats to our national security. And I think that the Department of Defense can be a real leader in sending us in a much better direction for how we actually approach this crisis. So in addition to accountability, I think from Congress, we can really bring about a more responsible transition in which the government is a leader and showing an example for all. So thank you.
All right, we're going to pivot to a more political question, and I'll let you take this one first. polls show that Republican voters are more concerned about border security than Democratic voters. So how pressing is the problem of border security in your view, and what should be done?
Yeah, when I think about border security, I think we've, for a long time, this goes back to Ted Kennedy, who was one of the real leaders on comprehensive, bipartisan immigration reform and border security measures, now stretching back more than 2 decades. We've tried to make progress on this in Congress. And this is really, the two go together in a really important way. I think my great-grandfather came to this country through Ellis Island over 100 years ago. He fled violence in northern Greece. He came through Ellis Island. He got a job as a dishwasher in downtown New York City at a hotel. He earned enough money to make his way up to Nashua, where he started the farm. I grew up down the road from our family farm. And this was all possible because we had immigration laws that were updated to meet the moment. Today, our system is outdated, it's overburdened, and it needs investment and updates across the board. So early in my career, I went to the United States Senate. I worked as a part of a bipartisan effort. They called it the Gang of Eight. And we put together a framework that's really a framework for the future. We sat with communities across the board, labor and business and advocacy groups, to really try to understand what the framework for the future of our immigration laws should look like. And this may sound like deja vu all over again, because right now we have a really great, it's not perfect, but it's an important set of first steps for a comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform and border security bill. And the only thing standing in between the American people, the people of this district, and that bill is Donald Trump and his lemmings in Congress. We're standing in between the progress that we need to see. So look, I want to work on this. One of the things I learned from working on comprehensive reform is that sometimes comprehensive can be the enemy of progress. And when it comes to border security, we've got overdose deaths here in New Hampshire that are directly attributable to deadly drugs that are flowing across our official ports of entry. And part of the reason that that's happening is we haven't updated the technology at our border that will prevent those drugs from flowing across official ports of entry. This bill includes much needed money for that precise cause. And so what I learned is that sometimes comprehensive can be an enemy of progress. I will fight to make the progress we need to see, to save lives here in New Hampshire and to make our nation safer.
So what we're seeing at the southern border is a serious problem for our country. Washington has done too little for far too long on this. Part of the problem we're seeing is an unprecedented level of drugs coming over, fentanyl, opioids, now meth, that are harming our communities here in New Hampshire and across the country. Often precursor chemicals that start in China, go to Mexico, put together, come over the border, or even through the mail. And the truth is, we all heard from our president today, if somebody makes it over the border and asks for asylum, it might be 6 years before he or she can ever get an asylum hearing. That's not good for anyone involved. It really isn't. And the border security bill that had bipartisan support in the Senate, that could have dramatically shaved that time. That's better for that individual. It's better for the safety of our communities. I think many of us watched the State of the Union. We saw even one of the most conservative Republicans in the US Senate from Oklahoma nod and say, yes, that's right, when Joe Biden talked about the need for border security. And that's what gives me hope that as we get past this presidential cycle, that we actually can get something done on this, that we can make progress on bipartisan border security. Wasn't everything perfect in that bill, but it was an important first step. And by pulling that apart from comprehensive immigration reform, it's a way to start making progress on both. On immigration reform, I've worked as an employer here in New Hampshire in the private sector. I've had 3 different times when I've lost a valued member of a team that I was working on to visa renewal application typos, often from the federal government itself. And when that happens, it takes months and months to get that resolved. And it's because our immigration system hasn't been updated for decades now. It's a problem for everyone involved. The truth is, in New Hampshire, we have low unemployment relative to other parts of the country. And we need high quality workforce here. And when we have broken immigration laws, we are doing ourselves and our communities a disservice. When someone has that happen and they go home and sit on their couch and they can't work and you have to backfill that job, everyone's frustrated. And it's time for us to make progress. And I think by pulling apart border security and immigration reform, it gives us the opportunity to make progress again after Washington has been broken and not made progress for decades now.
So I'm going to speak up a little bit. Yeah, all right. So Colin, this question is for you first. Do you believe that school choice and a healthy, vibrant public school system can coexist? If so, what will you do to ensure that our public schools don't get shortchanged in this light of era of school choice?
They certainly can coexist, but that doesn't mean that we should be using our public tax dollars to fund religious schools and private schools and things like that. And then planning kids to private schools anyway. I mean, it's a perversion of what the word choice means. I graduated from a public high school and had friends whose parents chose to send them to a private school, and that happened without a crazy voucher program. One of my kids is going into our neighborhood middle school as a 6th grader this fall, actually 2 weeks from now. One is going into the neighborhood public high school. I know personally, trust me, when you move around as much as I did, you learn very quickly that public school is one of the bedrock foundational safety nets of this United States of America. No matter what new community that you're in, that you can have a place where you can be accepted and learn and socialize with other people from your community. And I've watched my own kids get so much out of that public school education that they've been receiving. And I mean academically and socially and culturally and from a community standpoint. It's so powerful. What's happened in New Hampshire is that we have an education commissioner who does not believe in public education, who is trying to strip all of the resources out of our public schools and using a voucher program to do it. There's more that we need to do at the federal level to help our state legislators combat that. The truth is that that we need all schools to meet the same standards. And right now, many of those vouchers are going into schools that don't have the same requirements or obligations to support individuals in our community who are learning with special needs. Or to make sure that folks in the community have the support, academic support that would be expected at a local public school. So I think we need help from our federal delegation to ensure that here in New Hampshire, look, I would like to see that, and we're going to have a new education commissioner and we're going to have a new legislature and we're going to see some real changes to that program. But we also need to make sure that our national laws help prevent that from happening.
You know, everywhere I've gone, every day, I hear a new dimension to the attacks we're seeing on public education here in New Hampshire. And it's a trend across the country, but, you know, whether it's school boards and, you know, I was talking to the president of a school board who's every single day facing threats and attacks and in a real, this is all part of an attack on our public education system. And you read Project 2025, and like I said, there's something in it to scare the living daylights out of anyone. One of the things that Project 2025 proposes is essentially dismantling the Department of Education. And this is part of the same basic set of threats that we're seeing to our public institutions, our public officials, and our teachers who are on the front lines doing the most important work we can imagine. So look, I think there's a lot we can do. I think choice can coexist with a strong public education system in this state and in our country. But Congress has a couple of things that they can offer. First of all, federal funding is going to be incredibly important. I look at IDEA. I was talking to a special education teacher in Nashua who was explaining to me the impacts. You know, Congress set out a 40% funding rule, which is under federal law, that we just haven't been complying with. This is something we haven't been complying with. And this is something I want to help champion on day one. We got to see federal dollars flowing to the most vulnerable among us in our public schools. You know, the second piece is Congress plays a really important oversight role. And Frank Edelblue has been a pure unmitigated disaster. He is dangerous. And Congress should be shining a light. God help us, he should be gone by next year. But we've got to be shining a light on this voucher program. I hear about it every single day. What can we do to expose what's really happening? And I think there are a lot of questions. And I think this goes back to the team sport. We got to be playing together at all levels of government. And that's what I really want to be a part of. And that's what brings me to this work. So thank you.
I guess next question is best first. This is one of our state questions. Annie Custer has been deeply engaged with her district over the past decade. How will you stay connected with your constituents and their communities and ensure they get the resources and support when appropriate from federal agencies?
Yeah, so, I am the second lawyer in my family. My younger brother, thank God, he became a lawyer before I did. So we have a lot of, he got all got all the lawyer jokes directed at him. But I am a lawyer by training. I'm an advocate in my heart. And part of the way I see this job, it's an advocacy job. This is direct services, and it's what I love. I became an advocate in my heart right here in the 2nd District. I have been on the front lines of the fight for voting rights with some of the most patriotic people I know in the Granite State. I've worked in our drug courts, and I got my real start representing people in the most consequential and vulnerable moments of their life in family court. And when you're in family court, for anyone who's been there, you've got to learn how to be a real fighter and an advocate, because the stakes in every case couldn't be higher. And there are very few rules. So you got to learn how to really fight, and fight with all your heart. So that's really what I want to do. And Annie Custer's an incredible inspiration in this respect, and so is our entire federal delegation. Senator Sheen, Senator Hassan, Congressman Pappas, they point the way to how you can really be an advocate and deliver for the district. But one of the things I think about is 15 staff members. You get 15 staff as a member of the House of Representatives. I want most of those people, if I earn your support and you send me to Congress, I want most of those staff to be right here, overwhelming majority if I can, because what I've seen on the campaign trail every day is we've got brick and mortar offices where constituents should be able to come in and to get the kind of direct legal services that I saw firsthand as a pro bono lawyer here in New Hampshire. This is a direct services job. I've seen the difference that a member of Congress can make in fighting for, public benefits for veterans, making sure that federal funds actually reach their intended recipients. And I can tell you, the legislative process will never stop with a bill that appropriates funding. It won't stop until those dollars reach our community. I will fight with everything I've got, and it would be the honor of my lifetime to do that on your behalf.
I love our state representative questions. I could share stories about the Sewell's Falls Bridge in Concord and how we had to get federal support for that and working with Senator Shaheen to do it, or the Central Square project in Keene that needs a raised grant, the new version of what a Tiger grant used to be, and how we need an advocate for that. But let me share a different kind of story. A couple of years ago, I coached my younger son's 4th grade Concord Parks and Rec basketball, the Orange Dragons. I'm a horrible coach. I'm not Tim Walsh. Frankly, coaching 4th graders is hard. They get a lot of energy. You got to keep them focused. But it was a lot of fun. I really loved it. And a year and a half later, something came up, maybe a year later, that reminded me of that time. My wife runs a laundry services company. It's a small business we own. I think maybe a dozen employees or so. And they do an idea that started from their own employees, which is a free wash night for the homeless community. And it started because many of the folks who work on the team themselves have experienced homelessness at some point. Several are in recovery. They wanted to open this up to share human dignity with some of the folks from their community. And it started as a free wash night for the homeless community, and then it became free dinner too. And we would make like a big lobster pot full of chili or baked ziti or something like that and bring it in. And I think it was on a ziti night. I was in the laundromat with her at probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And somebody came in with their young son, and it was one of the kids on my son's basketball team. And there is something you can't replace about the feeling of knowing one of your kid's teammates himself is showing up at a free wash night for the homeless. And my point is, being a good advocate for our communities isn't just knowing about the bridges or the projects or the state representatives. As much as I love you all, those relationships matter. But it's also just having your life built here, based here, being a good advocate for our communities in every way that all of us do. Singing in the local choir or DJing a local radio station. I mean, these are the things that make our lives. And when you build your life here, it gives you a superpower that I think Annie Custer has had. I think Chris Pappas has it. I think Jean has it. I think Maggie has it. Those are 4 different people from different genders and different generations. But they know our state. They know our communities like the back of their hand. They really understand what our lives are like. That's how they're effective in Washington. And if that's what matters to you, I'm here to ask for your vote. That's the sort of representative I will be. Thank you.
All right, I think this will be our last question. And this is audience. It's a big one. So both Israelis and Palestinians had suffered and died under the leadership of Hamas and Netanyahu. What would you do in Congress to address the fact that our weapons are being used to kill thousands of civilians and starve many more? Will you support conditions on military aid to Israel? And how can we be a better part of the solution? Colin,
thank you. It's a really important question. And let me just say, we didn't have a chance to say hi on the way in, but Jake, your service to our country, for those who don't know, Jake Sullivan, Maggie Goodlander's husband, is here. He's our nation's national security advisor. I can only imagine how hard that work is and how important it is to all of us. Thank you for your service. And thank you, Maggie, for the service that comes with what I know every spousal relationship is when you have somebody in your family who serves. I've only seen some of the breaking headlines from earlier today. So I want to be cautious because I haven't read all of it. But I think my understanding from some of the headlines today is that a ceasefire agreement that has been long in the works is at the very cusp of actually becoming real. I think what I read was that Israel has signed off and that we have heard through intermediaries that Hamas is close to approving it. And I hope that we are at that moment that all of us have been desperate for months. The terrorism that was visited on Israel on October 7th of last year was horrific. 1,200 people killed, hundreds taken hostage, some of whom, over 100, are still held as hostage today. Imagine that in our own nation. That is a country 30 times smaller than us. Imagine those numbers times 30 here. So I think every conversation on this issue has to start with the acknowledgement that Israel has a right to defend itself and it has a right to exist, that they are an important ally of the United States of America. And I have found in this campaign that most people, when we have this conversation, can hold a few ideas in their mind at the same time. Those ideas I just articulated are not in conflict with the fact that the humanitarian crisis that has happened since then is untenable. 1 million civilians displaced, 1 million facing famine, tens of thousands of civilians who have been killed in this conflict. And we have to use every diplomatic tool that we have in order to bring this to an end. I believe those are not contradictory beliefs. And personally, I believe that both we need the urgency of an immediate ceasefire that comes with return of hostages, that comes with removing Hamas from operational control. And I also believe that we need a lasting peace. And it may feel hard or seem hard, but I believe a lasting peace has to come from a two-state solution. Until the people of Palestine and people of Israel both have representative democratic self-governance, some people will continue to turn to terrorism. And we will be caught in a cycle of violence that we are not going to be able to get out. So I'm optimistic based on the news that I have seen today. But I know that there's a lot, many, many more miles that we have to go here. And I think ultimately we have to stay persevering just as strongly towards a two-state solution in order to end the cycle of violence.
You know, I think Congress has a really important role to play in American foreign policy. I saw this early in my career. One of the first jobs I had was in the United States Senate, where we worked on a bipartisan, bicameral basis on questions of national security and foreign policy. And my husband, Jake, might actually not be as enthusiastic about Article 1 and the role of Congress as I am. But he's blushing because he doesn't like to be called out. But thank you for being here. And thank you for your nice words. Look, one of the things that makes the relationship between the United States and Israel different is Israel is a democracy in a region that doesn't have other democracies. And it's a democracy that has, like our own democracy, been under threat. Long before the attack of October 7th, which was the deadliest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. You know, last summer when I was teaching constitutional law at Dartmouth, one of the things we saw was a real attack on Israel's Supreme Court, on the independence of Israel's Supreme Court. And I think one of the things that makes the relationship between democracies, what I've seen different, is that we are honest with our true friends and we hold our friends to account, just as our friends hold us to account. I think the relationship between the United States and Israel is a deep and important one. I saw it in my work as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve. Our enemies are Israel's enemies. We have an incredibly important relationship on a bilateral basis. But you know, one of the things that makes the relationship special is that we both believe in international law. We both believe in human rights, and we both believe in our capacity for self-criticism and self-correction. So I agree with Colin. I think that in the short term, the focus for all of us has got to be creating the conditions for an immediate ceasefire, for a return of the hostages who have been held in brutal captivity for more than 10 months now, and a surge in humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza who are suffering unimaginable harms and brutality. You know, 2 million people who are on the brink of starvation. This is wrong. We have got to surge humanitarian assistance as part of this package. We got to restore a measure of peace. And the ultimate solution here is a two-state solution where Israel can live in security and the Palestinian people have an opportunity for dignity and a better future, free from Hamas's repression. So this is, I believe Congress has a really important role to play in this, particularly in this issue, because the relationship and the effort is going to take an all hands on deck approach. And I want to be a part of that on day one. Thank you.
We'll close with final remarks of 2 minutes. Colin, we'll let you do it first.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you everybody for streaming online or watching later. It's a really important choice just a few weeks from now in the primary and in the general election. And the stakes are really, really high. I've tried to share a lot of stories tonight because I like telling stories. It's a good way to relate experiences from our own lives. You've heard about things I've learned from my kids or their teammates. You've heard about things I've learned at places like Southern New Hampshire University or Stonyfield, or what I've learned representing 49 cities and towns across the state. My hope is that that experience in our nonprofits, in our businesses, in representing us in our state government, that's the sort of experience that helps me be a better advocate for us. Helps me understand what our communities are like, helps me understand what our lives are like. I think we deserve that representation in Congress. I think it's really important to New Hampshire. I think sometimes it's easy to take for granted because we've had a great delegation, but we can't afford to lose it. Our members of Congress are not the flashiest. They don't go viral on Twitter very often. Chris Pappas once told me it's okay to be boring. I don't know if he was talking about me or him, actually. But the truth is they just do put their heads down and do good work for communities that they know and love and have built their life around. I served with Chris for 4 years on the executive council. The number of times something that he learned from his family restaurant helped him inform a contract or a consideration or a new judge that we were confirming or hiring for, I've lost count of. The number of times Maggie Hassan's experiences in her own community shone through when she was our governor, and how I've seen her take that to Washington. No one gave any one of them a special decoder ring for how Washington works when you get down. But they've been extraordinary representatives for us because they know our lives, because they know our struggles. That's the sort of leader that I want to be. If having a New Hampshire representative who's in it for us is what's important to you, someone who you can have faith is going to win this fall, who's won this district before, who's building an unparalleled grassroots campaign in order to do it. I'm here to ask for your support. For you to come online, come to the website if you're online, vanostern.com. Talk to me or Miles, who's here for my campaign after. Get involved in the campaign. Take this fight on together. I'm excited for the work that we have ahead, and I know how important it is. And I'm so deeply grateful that you're taking your time tonight to hear from two of us who are on the same team fighting together for a democracy that we love and a state that is so and so important to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here tonight. You know, one of the questions I get every day is, why would you, from people all across the district, why would you want to go somewhere as crazy as the People's House? And it is a crazy place. My initials are MTG. There's another one of those, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And here's the deal. She's a show horse. I'm a workhorse. I love this state and I love our country. And I want to get in there and fight for you on day one with everything I've got, because I believe I haven't given up hope. You know, when you teach the Constitution, the first institution it creates is the People's House. It was the most democratic institution that the world had ever known. No one had seen anything like it. And I believe in the possibility of what we can do in Congress. We got to win, though. We got to win in November. And I'm in this race because I believe I'm best positioned to keep this seat blue and to deliver for you on day one in what is an unprecedented and really, really challenging moment in our nation's history. Look, day 3 on the job is January 6th. And you take a look at what the possibilities hold for us under Project 2025. So many of these fights, we didn't talk enough about the Supreme Court tonight. I hope we will in future conversations, because Congress is going to have to be on the front lines of holding the court accountable. I'm ready to do that. Thank you. You read the Constitution, and I hope you all will. If you're doom scrolling, you all seem like very measured people who probably don't do a lot of doom scrolling, but if you are doom scrolling, reading news persistently, bad news. And there's a lot of it, but you read the Constitution, you get to Article 3. It says that the justices of the Supreme Court get to keep their jobs on an important condition: good behavior. Those are the words the document uses. We've seen a heck of a lot of bad behavior from the United States Supreme Court, and for God's sakes, it's time to have a binding code of conduct and ethics for the United States Supreme Court. I want to bring that about on day one, because I believe we can get good things done for this country. I really do. And we're running an old school New Hampshire campaign. We're pounding the pavement. We've been on the trail for 102 days. We got 22 days to go. Well, actually 21 days and a night. Is that right, Colin?
And then the general.
And then the general. But I hope you will all vote on September 10th. I hope you'll tell all your friends to vote, because the right to vote is the right from which all of our rights flow. And we've got to vote. We've got to win. I hope you'll join us, Maggie4nh.com. We're having a great time on the campaign trail. We need your help. We are visiting every corner of this district. I hope you'll join us. And thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for
A huge thanks to both the candidates and their campaigns for traveling to Lebanon to participate. Can we give one more round of applause for we'll share the video of this event with everyone who registered via Mobilize, as well as our newsletter recipients. One last call of action for everyone here. Until Annie Custer won this congressional seat in 2013, it was held by a Democrat for only 8 of the preceding 100 years. So we cannot afford to rest on our laurels here, folks. We need to be out campaigning, calling, knocking on doors, volunteering in the office, the field office here, which is at the new location, 31 Old Etna Road, and ensuring that everyone who cares about the climate, affordable health care, housing, living wages, public education, reproductive rights, democracy, gets out and votes for Democratic candidates up and down the ballot. So thanks again for our candidates and our state representatives for all their hard work in ensuring our democratic values are translated into action. Now I'll turn it over to Kate Collins, the chair of the Left Dems, for final remarks.
Thank you all so much for being here. Special thanks to Maggie and Colin for traveling to Lebanon today, and to all of your people who came with you, and to our community. Yeah, I'm a little hard to hear, so turn me up a bit. The Lebanon Democratic Committee is a small committee in a city of a fair size with a lot of Democrats. We really use your help right now. In our town, we don't have to worry about getting Democratic representatives sent to Concord. We don't, we have to think about county seats and all that. But the power, the people power that lives here, the experience, the awareness, the ability to donate, we really need to grow our momentum here. Get involved with the committee, get involved with the organized campaign, visit their new office. We need folks here to help canvass, phone call, text from home, maybe even phone bank from home if that's what's most accessible for you, or text from home. There's lots of different ways to get involved with this campaign. And we really need the beautiful Democrats of Lebanon to do a lot, not just in our little fair city, but around the region where we have many competitive races, and at the county level, where there's also a lot of important things happening. So yeah, we'd love to have your help. And if you're worried about getting involved because you don't want to end up as the chair of the committee, don't panic. You can help out with one day. You can bring food to one event. You can phone bank at the office on a Wednesday, or join Adam and crowd at the farmers market from 4 to 6 p.m. And we'll just appreciate your help. We'll respect your limits, and we know you have lots of other things calling for your attention in life. So on that note, thank you so much for coming here. If you're looking for your next opportunity to hang out with a bunch of Democrats and have fun, there is a watch party for Kamala's speech on Thursday, which is going to be happening in downtown Hanover. I believe it's Sawtooth. And you should register for that because there's food and such. You can register on Mobilize, and I might be there. So glad to see you here. Please, safe travels on your way home. And you got a question?
So the registration doesn't say what time?
7:30 says the audience. Yeah. That should be fun. And it's good to have fun in the midst of all the hard work of campaigning. Thanks again, everyone. Have a lovely evening.